Welcome back to the Wiggly Podcast. This is episode 188. It's Michael here with the second part of the two-parter, wrapping up our collection of interviews with people who dropped into the Wiggly Garden at the Hay Festival. Hope you enjoy the show.
Well, during the course of making wormeries to take home, I got talking to this very friendly gentleman who has two wonderful children who have now got wormeries in a plastic bottle to take home, who was telling me all about his partner who comes along to Hay Festival practically every year to talk about green energy, sustainable energy, and apparently you're a supplier of green energy.
Yes.
Juliet Davenport.
Yes.
Nonetheless. Lovely to speak to you.
Lovely to speak to you too.
So what are you doing at the festival this year?
Well, I'm really enjoying myself actually.
Okay.
I've come to see lots of different things I don't normally see, because
Right.
when you're involved in sustainable energy you can get your head stuck in it sometimes. So I've been to see the wild food gourmand about what he did and living on the land, what it meant to him.
Right.
We've been to see Che Guevara, which is completely different, but
Okay.
again a revolutionary in a world that was stuck in two big areas. And in a sense I kind of see good energy and what we do at Alternative Energy really as a revolutionary world, thinking on how we can return to living closer to the land and living much more related ourselves to energy rather than just it being a distant thing in the somebody else's control.
Doesn't that smack of society generally though, isn't it? A complete detachment from everything that's provided for us.
Yes.
Externally.
I think what's interesting, I think food has moved much closer. I think we've got much closer to food with.
We have, I think, recently, certainly. Yeah, there's been quite a lot of promotion on television. It's the whole personality, celebrity kind of thing, getting the message across, I suppose. But yeah, no one's really taking the bull by the horns so far as green energy is concerned. We hear about the conflicts associated with siting wind farms and the like. But other than that, no one's really said, right, come on, let's make a real difference and let's just buy from a supplier that uses wind or tide or biomass to make energy from. I
think there are some people who are thinking that way, but they're still quite small voices, and there's so many other things going on in the world. So Innocent Drinks, for example, have always bought their stuff from green energy. There's a company called Mackey's Ice Cream who generate their own power from 3 wind turbines.
Okay.
So I think there are small cases of it, but I don't think the stories are getting out.
So what do you do exactly then, Juliet?
Well,
you have a company, don't you?
Yes. Well, I set up a company because I was originally an atmospheric physicist.
Okay.
So I kind of found out about climate change through my studying, and before that was kind of not really an environmentalist at all. I went to university and then said, okay, this is the area I want to dedicate the rest of my life to. And,
so what's the distinction between an atmospheric physicist and a conventional physicist?
Well, I suppose you do a specialist area in studying the atmosphere and how that interacts with the planet.
Sense, I'm not entirely sure whether I've just asked a ridiculously stupid question. Or,
No, I don't think so. It could be.
I was just expecting a simple answer, but yeah.
The physicists of general atmosphere of people or something.
Okay,
but no, you're right. No, it's to do with how our atmosphere interacts with the planet.
Okay, wonderful.
And so I kind of then started getting involved in government stuff and all that. But it all seemed so distant. Nobody was taking any notice. And politicians are useless. I'm sorry, they are. Well, they were. And I still think they are.
They certainly are.
And they just said, well, we're not going to do anything until our people tell us to do something. So I thought, okay, well, I need to get closer to people. So that's why I set up a company.
Wonderful. And how's your company doing? And you supply electricity.
Yeah.
How does that work then? I mean, have you got a great big acreage where you've got a huge, inordinate amount of machinery that generates electricity, or what?
Well, we've now got about 620 generators.
Okay.
So these are people, companies, organisations, communities who generate power.
Right.
And sometimes they use part of it, and we buy any excess that they've got left over.
And how does that work?
We use the national grid. So the national grid we use as an overall system, and essentially what we do is we connect people who the financials, I suppose. It's by the more you buy, the more we have to source.
Okay.
So we connect you with we connect all our customers with generators. That's kind of how it works.
I see.
In terms of the physical electricity, it doesn't go from a generator to a home. It doesn't work like that.
No.
It's more like a kind of knock-on effect. So in fact, electrons don't move; they just bump into each other or vibrate, and so you get vibrations at one end and they move all the way down.
Okay.
That's kind of how it works.
Okay, righto.
You're looking slightly confused.
Yeah, no, well, that's just my general demeanour.
Oh, right, okay. So what we do is the more customers we get, the more people we go and buy power from. That's how it works, really. We also generate a bit ourselves, so we've got about 7% of the power that we buy from a generator that we own. But what we try to do is create a community of lots of other independent generators. Because actually what's happened in the UK is that we've got too many big power stations centrally owned, so that when you try and change things, it's really hard. And what we need is far more people involved in generating and being generators.
That makes perfect sense.
And that's what we're trying to be, the facilitator for that, so breaking down the kind of the traditional structure in a way.
Okay. So what are the implications then? How do people come to your company? Was it Green Energy? Or
Good Energy.
Good Energy, okay. I've heard of Ecotricity.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of Good Energy before, but that's probably because I'm just ignorant. I'm sure the listener will be perfectly aware of it. But how do people, if they're, for instance, subscribing to British Gas or Empire or something, how do they change? How could they go to you, and what would it cost them extra?
Yeah, it would. I mean, the easiest way to change is look up Good Energy on the internet. That's probably the easiest way. If you're internet savvy, or if not, you can call us and speak to. You can look it up.
But you could just whack it into Google, could you? Good Energy, and it'll come up with your site.
Yes, exactly. And then go into our site and have a look around.
Yeah.
And in there, we've got different sections about whether you want to become a generator yourself. So if you decided, actually, I don't want to just buy power, I want to be a generator, you can go and find out how to do that through our site. Or if you don't feel like you want to go that far yet, maybe just become a customer. Or if not, just find the information. We've got lots of information about, we've got a whole advice piece, which is about how you yourself can change how you use energy.
Right.
So what's the most effective way in your home, how your lifestyle affects how you use energy, to reduce your impact.
Fantastic. So the bottom line then.
Yes.
So a typical, I don't know, British Gas customer, what's it going to cost them extra per quarter to have their electricity from a supplier where there are no implications in terms of increasing the climate change off the back of burning fossil fuels?
Well, we worked out it's about £1 a week.
Is that all?
So if I translate, that's about £12 a month.
Is that all?
Yes.
Right. That's not much, is it then, really, in the big scheme of things?
Not in the big scheme of things. But also what we try hope is that people will save the same amount by investing in energy efficiency.
Okay. That's wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much too. Lovely to meet you.
Well, it's a different day today, slightly blowy, typical kind of the festival really, not quite as bad as last year, but I'm fortunate enough to be joined by a gentleman called Charles Hawes.
Yeah.
Fantastic garden photographer.
Yeah, this
nonetheless.
This is a rubbish day for garden photography, I tell you. The one thing that garden photographers hate is wind, and Hay has got it in spades today.
What about this broken cloud? It's kind of these atmospheric conditions. The light, does it not lend itself to some neat pickies?
Well, I hate to be picky, but there isn't enough cloud around because it's too bright for photography. So it's too bright and it's too windy. Okay. So I'll be just glad to go in a tent somewhere and have an ice cream.
So you're not planning to take any ace shots of the Wiggly Garden while you're over here?
Sadly, no. I'm a tripod man, and it's not with me in the car. I'm here really we've just done a talk. Stephen Anderton, the author, and me have done a talk on our book Discovering Welsh Gardens.
Okay.
And it's the first book that's been on Welsh gardens. We actually have wonderful gardens in Wales here, but they're not very well known, so we thought that we needed a book.
Why is that?
I think it's partly because of things like the Severn Bridge. People won't cross over the Severn Bridge and come to Wales.
It costs £5.40 now, you know.
I know, but, hey, it's good value. It's a beautiful country, and the gardens are worth it.
I'm not sure the bridge is an inhibiting factor. I'm not sure that the bridge is the reason, but it's...
you get out for free.
It's like one of the only good thing to come out of Wales is the road to England.
No, and the gardens, and we do have fantastic gardens.
Yeah. Well, Wales is beautiful. It's astonishing country.
Looking down at this lovely Ragged Robin you've got here.
I know, it's done so well, isn't it, this year?
Isn't it good?
Well, essentially, this is a floodplain, of course, so it's suited to Ragged Robin nicely, yeah, and it does well. I mean, the turf only went down about 14 months ago, and it's improved dramatically on what it was last year, which is good, because Ragged Robin can go one or two ways, you know. It can flourish, or equally it can deteriorate, you know.
Well, I tell you, I was photographing at the Chelsea Flower Show last week, and this patch of your Ragged Robin and the tree stumps wouldn't have looked out of place in any of the show gardens.
No,
truly,
fantastic.
Truly, it looks good. But I mean, discovering Welsh gardens. It's been a discovery. The book is stuffed full of some really fantastic gardens in Wales, like Bodden and Tempowys Castle. But there's also really nice little gardens that people have been making quietly away for a few years, and maybe just open in the National Garden Scheme. And gardens like ours, actually, at Bedw House down at Divorden, which is getting to be quite well known. Actually, someone called it in the book, I think Stephen described it as the most controversial garden in Wales, for its credit. But, and we open regularly to the public. But there is a whole range of gardens of different sizes.
What does the book offer? I mean, presumably you've got some amazing imagery.
What's particular is that for each of the main gardens in the book, we've given 10 pages to each garden. So it's offering a really good view about each of the gardens that we feature. But what's particular also is that Stephen has been writing in the book in a way that's quite unusual for garden writing, because he's been willing to say some things that are, let's say, a little bit critical about some of the gardens, or some aspects of the gardens. And usually in garden writing you just don't get anyone saying anything other than everything's lovely in this garden. Now, I know your Ragged Robin looks good and your vegetable patch looks good, but I'm sure if we spent a few minutes I might find something that I thought,
I don't think you would.
You don't think I would? Actually, I'm struggling here. This is a near perfect garden, isn't it?
Sure. Perfectly imperfect. Yeah, I think you're fine.
But anyway, so we've actually brought out, I think, some things about the gardens that people, would read and think, gosh, that's quite a thing to say. That would be better off without that, or that needs a chainsaw, but that's constructive in my view. People need to be more willing to discuss gardens more openly and honestly than just writing about them saying they're all looking fantastic.
Truly, indeed, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. And so the kind of the audience that came along to your event earlier on, I mean, what sort of questions did you get asked?
I'm glad to say that we didn't get asked about any kind of plant care questions. You get a panel of people interested in gardens, and they want to know about their cactus.
On my clematis?
That's right.
I have no idea.
The best question was actually someone asked us about what we thought we ought to be doing with the Olympic garden, because there's going to be a garden created at the Olympic site in London, and we were asked about what kind of garden we thought
will that
would be nice.
Left as a legacy?
It's difficult to say. I mean,
hopefully,
it hasn't even been built.
And I suppose you would aspire to creating something that can benefit the community in long term, so something that's got longevity.
Well, it'll probably get bought and transplanted in Dubai or something like that.
So it's concerned about the Olympics. You kind of think one of the only real. I'm slightly biased. One of the only good things come out of the Olympics is what it leaves behind.
Yeah, well, that's true,
because it's a fairly astonishing waste of money generally. But we shall see.
I think it'll be an absolute nightmare. Everything's going to be done by committee, isn't it? You can see it, how there can be a room full of people discussing what they've got to have in a garden. I kind of feel a bit despondent about gardening by committee. You
need to take charge. I mean, a garden is ultimately something that I suppose a single person or possibly a pair of you take responsibility for. And things get complicated. Everyone's got a slightly different idea of what should be done and how it should be done.
Yeah, when you've got too many people involved in a garden.
So, Charles, what do you do with most of your time then? How do you spend most of your time? I mean, presumably you're a practical man. You spend spend a reasonable amount of time outside.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a hands-on gardener, so if I'm not taking photographs of gardens, I'm working in our own garden. At the minute, we've discovered an old ruin in our grounds, and I've been rebuilding it for about 20 years. And just this last week, I actually got to ground level, the floor level, and found this old doorstep of this 18th century cottage, just sitting there, this slate doorstep.
So a practical, not a folly then, something that was had a practical use.
No, it was a little cottage, and we're now kind of bringing it right in the middle of our garden. So I've rebuilt the walls, and we're going to just gently add some ferns, and nothing too loud and special, and but quiet. And
Well, that's I suppose that's the quintessential ruin, isn't it? Something that's soft and shady and almost slightly secretive and utterly romantic.
I know. I'm so excited about it. Actually, I want people to come and see it. Because we open our garden at Vedu House from June through till August on Sunday afternoons.
And how do you advertise? How can people find out about when and how they can get along?
We usually come to people like Wiggly Wigglers, so I can give a plug for my own garden opening.
Absolutely. So when is your garden open?
Well, it's from June through to August on Sunday afternoons from 2 till 5. And the garden is called Vedu House.
Right.
And it's 2 miles out of Devorden village, which is near Chepstow.
Okay, and it's relatively easy to find?
Well, we've got a website, www.veddw.co.uk, and we're, Google on VEDDW and you'll get to our website.
Okay, and presumably if people, your website has a host of images on there that
it does actually.
People appreciate, and some of which will almost certainly be in your book.
Yeah, and the book is on the website, so people can click through from the website to the publishers, and it's all terribly tidy. And this is what's fantastic about the web, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. Yeah, the web is a wonderful thing indeed. Okay, thank you very much, Charles. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to see such a lovely garden. There must be something wrong here somewhere.
I think that you'll find there is. Well, as the last Friday of the festival begins, on what is looking a very promising day yet again, which kind of makes all the difference on this garden, as you can appreciate. Weather is key, I've been joined by a gentleman who our own Rachel Harries has spoken to, I think, previously, who's going to talk about... Possibly we've looked at hedgehogs before, but I think this gentleman's going to talk about why he's fascinated with hedgehogs and ultimately what this kind of garden could offer your average hedgehog. So I wonder if you'd introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, well, thank you. My name's Hugh Warwick, and I've recently written a book called A Prickly Affair, My Life with Hedgehogs, which sounds so terribly sort of whimsical and fun, but actually does a whole bunch of the natural history of hedgehogs, but couched in the stories that people tell. Because I've just come from the green room here, and in the space of a couple of minutes I had people I've sort of heard of and I'm nervous of, like sort of Kate Adie and Rosie Boycott come in, and each time I'm introduced and they go, oh gosh, well, we had a hedgehog in our garden. And every single person I've met, they always have a hedgehog story, and that's why I think they're so crucial as an animal, because they are this sort of one little connection with the wild that we get, something which no other animal can offer. But this is amazing. So is this garden here all the time, or do you build it each year?
This garden's here, we put it in about 14 months ago, and it'll be here for another sort of 3 or 4 years. The idea was to create something that could be improved upon year on year, So this year we put in the willow bowers and the chamomile bund, and added a few extra logs. And we had a chap, Mark Eccleston, came over and did some stuff with the kids on Wednesday in all the rain. What few people braved the torrential downpour to come and enjoy putting some slates and logs together. And interestingly, I think you'll find that there's a rather large cavity in the middle of that habitat pile that might lend itself.
It was as soon as I was looking over there, I saw that pile and I thought, well, okay, there's bumblebee habitats in there, there's all sorts of other animal habitats in there, but wouldn't it be great if there's space underneath? And I can see there's some straw pulled in. I mean, that's the sort of thing all a garden needs to be hedgehog friendly, apart from having hedgehogs nearby, is to have food and to have shelter. I mean, that's really all hedgehogs need. Their needs are very simple, and the food comes in the form of the invertebrate pests which you want to get rid of, and the shelter comes from you not doing too much gardening. And I do a lot of talks with the WI, and that's always a question I'm asked.
Don't we all?
Oh, yeah, yes. And I love it, because one of the questions I'm always asked is, how do I make my garden more hedgehog friendly? And I say, do less gardening.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Do not manicure things, do not kill things, do not wipe all the insects and the plants off the face of the earth apart from a few things in your borders that you want to keep. Let there be wild patches. Because with
thrives on neglect.
Absolutely. And a little bit of wildness in the corner of your garden doesn't remove from the quality of your garden and adds to the quality of the wildlife habitat.
Okay, it's an interesting thing there. I mean, you seem like a perfectly sensible bloke, and I mean, you do.
The delights of radio.
Oddly, when you talk about dog owners, you often say, well, people look like their dogs, and I can see similarities between you and possibly a nice little cuddly hedgehog. I mean that in a very manly way. You understand? I don't know. But equally, it does. I'm slightly puzzled by why someone would be so passionate about hedgehogs to the extent that they would write a book.
Well, I started out, and I still am actually an ecologist. I mean, my background is studying the hedgehog in a very practical and pragmatic way, looking at the impact of the hedgehogs on the ground nesting birds of Orkney. I was up in Orkney.
Were you part of that? Taking.
Well, that was Orkney. Then there's the Uists in the Outer Hebrides, which is the more recent story, and I've been involved with both of these events, and studying the hedgehogs, trying to assess the impact of the hedgehogs on the birds, but also trying to look at the best ways of managing the populations. So my background is actually quite sort of sensible, I like to think. But then what has happened is, as I've spent more time studying the hedgehog, because right when I started, there was very little work. This is over 20 years ago. Very little work done on what hedgehogs actually do. Yeah. There's lots of stuff about the physiology, the physiological fluctuations of hormones inside hedgehogs in hibernation. There was loads of technical details about that. And now people are looking at the genetics of hedgehogs and all that sort of lab-based stuff. But actually doing what do hedgehogs do? How do they live? How do they integrate into the ecosystem? It's just, it's grunt work. It's boring work. People don't normally do it. And hedgehogs don't fit the bill for the normal species to be studied. They are normally pest species, prey species, or game species.
Right.
And they're none of those. So people have ignored the hedgehog. So I started thinking, well, this is simply, wow, okay, there's an absence of knowledge, let's look at it. And then as I've got to know more about the hedgehog, I've done more talks, I get to meet more people who are far more passionately involved with hedgehogs than I am, and from that has grown.
Is that possible?
Oh, really?
I'm talking to you now.
Really, it is much more. I went to America, and there were some things happening over there.
America, you can see
the Rocky Mountain Hedgehog Show, which is a bit like Crufts but with prickles, rounded off with the International Hedgehog Olympic Games. And no, it is true. All documented in my book, I'm afraid. It's true. But so I met all these people in the UK in particular who are very passionate, the hedgehog carers and things, and really, I mean, what my book is as much about the stories of these people and about the reason behind their absolute passion. I look at these people as my sort of escape mechanism because, as you yourself have indicated, people will make assumptions about my sanity with regards to the passion with which I talk about hedgehogs. But I look to these people and go, but compared to them, I'm just really normal. And so they are just, it's really great. So that's one of the reasons why I track them down, is just so I can reassure myself.
Okay, well, I think we should probably leave it there. And I'm just wondering, though, your fantastic book, how do people get hold of it? How can they get hold of a copy?
Amazon, wherever. I mean, it's all best bookshops. Or come to one of my talks and I'll sign it.
Do you want to tell us what it's called again?
It's called A Prickly Affair, My Life with Hedgehogs. Or if you're listening in America, it's called The Hedgehog's Dilemma, which was actually the title I wanted. But Bloomsbury chose a different title in the States, or Penguin chose a different one here.
Well, you can swallow that, can't you? If Bloomsbury are prepared to publish a book for you, you can probably swallow the fact that
Penguin are willing to do it here.
Indeed. So,
but no, A Prickly Affair. It's
go with it.
It's entertaining. It's fun. You'll learn stuff, but you won't really notice you're doing it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure.
Well, the very first interview at the Hay Festival this year is going to be undertaken by a gentleman called Steve Trent, and it was a fantastic event that's lined up for the first Friday of the festival this year, and it caught my eye because obviously, as far as the listeners are aware, I'm decidedly keen on all things fish-like, so the expression pirate fishing was something that I was particularly attracted to. So I managed to hunt this gentleman down, and it's good to meet you. And I wonder if you'd sort of introduce yourself to the listener and tell them exactly what you're doing up here.
Great to meet you too. And as you said, I'm called Steve Trent. I'm one of the founding directors of the Environmental Justice Foundation.
Okay.
And today at Hay we are hosting a panel with John Vidal, the environment correspondent from The Guardian,
Right.
Anthony Worrell-Thompson, the chef,
Right.
and a gentleman who buys fish from Waitrose.
Okay.
He's a senior buyer. And the key to what we're talking about is how consumers and individuals, I think, can deal with an issue that's far out at sea, quite simply, and actually have an impact as an individual. My personal belief is that as a consumer you often have more choice and more power than you do as a voter.
Right.
I think many perhaps today would agree with me on that one. And what we're talking about is we're trying to highlight the impacts of this so-called pirate fishing. And these are illegal vessels that are roaming the planet, unregistered, unregulated, and they're taking very fragile and delicate fish stocks. They're targeting poor countries that have no capacity to manage or regulate or conserve their fish stocks. And they are literally stealing from the poorest people on the planet and stealing from our planet.
Right.
What the pirates do, in effect, is undermine all the legitimate fishing operations. They use unsustainable fishing gears like drift nets and trawls.
Right.
They abuse their crews. Human rights abuses are notorious on these vessels. And they are having a disproportionate impact.
Okay, I mean it's an interesting thing because when I think of overfishing generally, I think about the lack of direction that the common fisheries policy has got, for instance, and certainly the problems associated with EU vessels fishing off some of the poorer African countries, off the sort of continental shelves there, and depleting their stocks of fish. So the partisan fishermen are losing their livelihoods, and interestingly, of course, this kind of the pirate behaviour and mugging oil tankers off the back of these kind of the relationships that occur in there. So it hadn't really occurred to me that there were real problems associated with illegal fishing as well, in addition to problems with quotas.
Yes, I mean, alongside the chaos that we're causing, Europeans, Japanese, North Americans, you name it, big industrial fisher fleets are still responsible for a huge amount of destruction in our seas and oceans. They're not properly managed, they're still not regulated. If a politician tells you that they are, they're simply not telling the truth.
Yeah.
But alongside that now, this burgeoning phenomenon of pirate fishing, which is probably worth somewhere in the region of $25 billion every year.
Good Lord.
And as I've just said,
it's hard to comprehend.
It's very hard to comprehend, and because it's out there, it's an unknown world to most people. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it.
No.
But we have ways and means of dealing with these pirate fishing vessels. We could stop it now. We could do very simple things like get rid of so-called ports of convenience. There's a notorious one that supplies much of Europe's fish called Las Palmas.
Right.
We could close that down. That's within our power to do. You could get rid of flags of convenience, where, for example, some of these pirate fishing vessels are flying a Mongolian flag, which allows them to avoid all the controls and regulations that we have, were they to, for example, fly a flag from Great Britain.
Really?
We could stop that tomorrow.
Sure.
These are simple solutions that could begin to introduce controls and checks and balances to force them out of our seas and oceans.
Why haven't these things already happened, though? I mean, surely people are aware of these occurrences. People in power must be aware that these things go on. I mean, presumably by coming here at what is certainly the biggest literary festival in the world, you're looking to raise awareness about the fact that it is so prevalent, because it really hadn't occurred to me that was the case.
I mean, why is it not being done? It's a very good question. The European Union, for example, has been very slow in looking after its own waters, as we know. The Mediterranean is virtually fished out. I think there's political apathy. I think politicians look at it as an issue that isn't really a vote winner. Right. Fish don't buy you votes very commonly.
It's just out of mind, out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. But now at least we do have, through pressure from a whole host of organisations that have been working on this, we have the European looking at a new regulation, European-wide regulation, that would find ways and means to try and combat pirate fishing.
Okay.
We also need to see greater, more effective and efficient aid and assistance to developing world countries that simply have no capacity to deal with this. Right. It's not about spending vast amounts of money, it's about spending small amounts of money cleverly and effectively in a locally appropriate way.
Okay.
And that could change people's worlds. And I've personally seen what happens when these pirate fishing vessels come in and what it means for a small local community. If they lose the fish, they lose the means to feed themselves.
Yeah,
it's not about lifestyle, it's about life or death almost.
Yeah.
And we need to help those people. We're honour bound, we have a duty and an obligation, not least because much of this fish we know is ending up on our plates here in the UK and across the European Union.
It's astonishing, isn't it? And what types of species should we avoid then? What would you say? I mean, people are inclined to think, I shouldn't eat cod, because apparently they're endangered. Probably most of the cod that we get in our fish and chip shops in the UK comes from Iceland now, doesn't it? We've tended to fish out most of our waters.
Well, it's a very good question, but what I'd like to say is it's not what you can't do, it's about what you can do.
Right.
And I think there are positive choices out there now. So if you look and see a Marine Stewardship Council logo, which means that the fishery from which that fish has come from has been checked out, it's being monitored, it's being regulated, and it's efficient and effective. Buy that.
Right.
And I'd also say to everyone, ask your retailer, ask your fishmonger, ask your restaurant if that's where you're eating it. Where did it come from? How do you know it's legal and it hasn't been stolen from some poor person in sub-Saharan Africa? And make sure that they understand that you are concerned and you want a good product. A product that's been fished sustainably, using science-based management, and that is not going to cause a really, really big problem for our children and future generations.
Okay, and presumably if Waitrose are sitting in our panel later on for your event, they're already actively pursuing the right choice of product to purchase. But would you say that was the case for other supermarkets, Tesco's and Asda and whatnot? Do they have the same sort of purchasing policies?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I think the truth is Waitrose have taken a very responsible approach. I think if you talk to them openly and honestly, they'd say at first it was about quality, and now they recognise it's also about conservation and environment. But the other major retailers, even where they are doing some things well, there are huge gaps in their sourcing policy. So just to give you one simple example, many of them now still sell tropical shrimp, prawns.
Okay.
Delicious, lovely as they are. But we've documented that for maybe 1 kilogram of shrimp caught, up to 25 kilograms of other species, other fish are caught and then just thrown away.
No.
So this is an insane
practice.
That's
a huge bycatch, isn't it?
It's a huge bycatch, and if it means more to people, they're also catching species like turtles and dolphins. It's a wholly unsustainable fishery, and everybody knows this now. The science is out there, the data's out there, and I think all of the retailers have to look at where their fish is coming from, their seafood products coming from, and change now. They have a responsibility, and I think consumers want this. It's not all about price.
I think people. I'm almost sure that people want this. I just don't think, as we started off this conversation, they're aware of the significance of their actions. The implications of eating fish from what will almost certainly be really impoverished environments.
Yeah. Well, you can, and I just say again and again, you can do something. You can have an impact. It sounds like a very small thing, but I think in my experience of 20 years of doing this, I've seen how collectively very small actions by individuals add up to a huge change, and we can do this, but you have to be vocal, you have to be heard, and you have to vote with your wallet.
Right, it makes perfect sense. But before you go, just give me a little bit of lowdown on your organisation, because I'm assuming then you must spend a reasonable amount of your time campaigning for a particular purpose, in this case sustainable fisheries. But what other stuff do you do?
The Environmental Justice Foundation makes a direct link between environmental security and human rights. And that's a broad statement, might sound a bit silly, but what I really mean by that is we understand that a safe and a secure environment, particularly for poor people, means for many a way of surviving, a way of living a healthy life. When you take away the basics of a secure environment, when you cut down the trees, when you get rid of the fish, when you pollute the streams, those people who have no other source of income or way of living, they suffer first, most and longest.
Right.
So we make that link, and what we try and do is bring peaceful, sustainable, long-term solutions that, as I use this phrase, locally appropriate. What might work in Hay or in the UK probably might not work in Sierra Leone or Guinea Conakry or other countries.
Almost certainly, I would think.
Yes. So try and make them sustainable, and try and... I think everybody's interested in money these days, and what we try and do is maximise our impact with spending our money cleverly and effectively and using local people in their environment to build their own solutions. It's not about a top-down, it's about working with them to create a world in which they are safe, they are secure, and the environment is there for the future.
Fantastic. Sounds like you're doing some wonderful work.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
And you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Well, that wraps up our collection of interviews from the Hay Festival. Well, not quite. There is one more, but I'm going to save that for next week when the team will be back on the Wiggly sofa, because I think this is one that Farmer Phil in particular is going to want to discuss. So until then, it's goodbye from just me and, of course, Monty.
The Montycast, a weekly fact on wiggliness. A quince is a relative of the apple and the pear, and is yellow and lumpy, but makes nice jam. Another Montycast next week on the Wiggly Podcast.